This week, the administration announced the merge of two departments, and that bill will be taken up shortly. I always feel bad when one commissioner doesn't get to say anything, so I'm going to ask Commissioner Beardsley to talk a little bit about this proposal, why it's good for Maine, and if you would start out, and then we'll have Commissioner Witt come say a few words about it as well.
Well, part of it is because, is that on? Yeah, part of it is because my mother was a Whitcomb and Walter's a Whitcomb, and his family went into dairy farming. My family went into forestry, and so he and I are going to go out behind the outhouse and duke it out with our chainsaw and pitchfork. But seriously, forestry and agriculture and conservation have been the three large natural resource engines that we've had in this state for a long time, and they fit together. And sometimes people say it's just forestry. Well, you go back to this part of Somerset County, you go out in those deep woods where you find the cellar holes and the stone walls. That's from the merino sheep era, when there was this vast open country. And that was in 1871. Now you go to 1971, it was all forested. What we're trying to look at is we've got the potential for one of the strongest agricultural industries. We could be the food basket for New England. We already are on the front page. I was in New York, the city, this last weekend with my wife, and on the front page of the Sunday travel section of the New York Times was Huts to Trails, Trails to Huts, whatever. I mean, the whole thing was about Maine. So you've got tourism, you've got ecotourism, and the forest industry. We've just come out with reports on softwood that says we're going to have 60% in 20 years, 60% more standing softwood timber than we have today. Hardwood's a little bit tighter, but it looks good. We know where the carbonate soils are. We've got carbonate soils for both agriculture and forestry, where you can do intensive silviculture. We now in forestry can identify ways in which you can increase the yields fourfold by putting in genetically improved trees, by doing selective thinnings to do. So we've got all this potential. And I think the governor's really challenged us. Say, how do you do a balance? And he says, protect those areas of intrinsic value. They're so valuable for tourism and ecotourism and those kinds of things. Yes, they should be protected, but really advanced agriculture and forestry. So that's the way we're looking at it. We're trying to streamline our regulations. As Walter is doing it in agriculture. We found that local sawmills couldn't give wood for a local building project by government because we had restrictions, because they were certified by the wrong certification group. So the governor introduced an executive order that says anything that's nationally certified should qualify to be able to put that lumber into building things. That's just unleashed tremendous opportunities. So that's what we're really looking at. We're looking at a 21st century natural resource economy. The state historically has been built on the natural resources. We want it to be built on natural resources again. So that's why I'm just so pleased to be able to work with the governor and colleagues like we have here today. And it's a wonderful state, and we are transitioning as we speak. Thank you.
One more brief comment, because we've talked about it a little bit, to add to Dr. Beardsley's thoughts, is that it seems to me the common denominator that those folks that work with the lands have is just the long-term interest in the sustainability, whether it's for agricultural production, forest production, recreational use, or for the protection of those very unique and beautiful spots that we all cherish in the state. And in a time when state government needs to reassess our abilities to provide services, we've seen a radial shrinkage in the national resource agencies. Every time there's a cut, we lose a person. And in fact, there's one proposed right now where you literally don't have deputies or assistants to people. We've got to start cutting programs. So this step is actually a very measured step. None of the statutory responsibilities that now exist under the Department of Conservation, and none of those responsibilities under agriculture will be changed by our proposed legislation. Everybody's job, except the commissioners, stays the same. But what we will do in the next several months, if the legislature gives us permission, is to look at those areas that just make common sense. And you can see it in this area. The Forest Service and the Agricultural Department both have interaction with the maple syrup industry. And it's a major driver in Somerset County, not perhaps so much where you see it, but in a lot of areas where you don't, in the far northern part of the county, one of the top maple syrup producing counties in the country. It just makes no sense for us to regulate it and for his foresters to work with those people without having some common basis for going forward. We have a number of those instances. There are entomologists in his department working with the Forest Service, there are entomologists that work with agriculture. They just ought to be working together. And we can do that some under existing statute. It just makes a lot more sense to have them housed and work in a common thread of common purpose. I think it'll be a healthy discussion. I think it'll be a discussion in the legislature to move our industries forward. And I think the common denominator by all of us, even some of those who have some hesitation about change, is that there really is an interest in both the forest products industry and the agricultural industry and the local supply of food that sort of drives us all. And I think that's why we'll end up with whatever the legislation looks like. Thank you.
And if you look at it one step further, our legislature has combined the two. Federal government has combined the two many, many years ago. And when you speak to the Department of Agriculture, you talk to Vilsack, the Forest Service under him. And so they really blend together well. The way I measure it is very simply this. A forest is nothing but a garden. It just takes a little longer to grow. And I learned that from a gentleman that I worked for when I was with Scott Paper Company. I asked him one day, Bob, whatever possessed you to be a forester? And he says, it's the only career I could find that you can spend your whole life working in it, retire before they find a mistake.